Hello. In this module, we're going to talk about the Romantic era. Now, the word romantic in this use comes from the medieval word romance, which described tales that reveled in the fictitious and the legendary, living in an ideal world that contrasts with our own. We find in this era, which coincides with the Industrial Revolution and is considered to last from 1820 to 1900, that mankind moves from the countryside to the city, but then talks about how wonderful the countryside is. While man pursues achievements in science, the Romantics are drawn to the unconscious, the irrational, horror, and the make-believe. This is the era of Edgar Allan Poe. If you haven't been freaked out by his fictional works, you might look at them but don't plan to sleep afterwards. This is also when Frankenstein was written. Poets also reveled in passion and originality. William Wordsworth claimed that all good poetry was a spontaneous outflow of powerful feeling. Walt Whitman wrote, "I celebrate myself and sing myself." You can see the emphasis on passion in painting in the works of Eugène Delacroix and Honoré Daumier, where clarity is not the focus, but feeling. Romantics were also fascinated with the chivalry of the Middle Ages, reflected in the novels Ivanhoe by Walter Scott and The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. Architecture followed that fascination of the Middle Ages with a Gothic revival as seen in the Houses of Parliament in London and the Trinity Church in New York. Aside from some composers like Brahms, who were considered neoclassicists, there was much less emphasis on form in the musical style. Rhythms were less vital and less varied. The musical interest is now in lush, lyrical melodies. Harmonies are experimented with, resulting in expanded chords and interesting modulations. Instrumentation is developed, with composers discovering interesting color by combining instruments in different ways and producing sound on them differently. In Bolero, you hear a trumpet and a flute playing the exact same melody at the same time, and it creates a completely different tone color. This is the era of extremes. Many works are written for a single performer or maybe two performers. Some are written for groups so large that they fit nowhere, like Mahler's Symphony of a Thousand. Lengths of works varied from 2 lines long to works that literally took 3 days to perform. Instruments were improved. Trumpets and French horns acquired valves and pistons, enabling them to play the entire chromatic scale throughout their entire range. The strings improved their tone. The bridge was raised and the strings were lengthened so that they could hold their own in the growing orchestra. Instruments were added to the orchestra, including the tuba, which gave a true bass to the brass section, and the saxophone, piccolo, bass and snare drums, triangle, and cymbal. 2 important types of music developed in the Romantic era: program music and nationalistic music. Program music illustrates a literary or artistic work, as seen in the works of Mendelssohn, Schumann, Berlioz, and Liszt. Nationalistic music reflects the culture of different nations by using their folk songs, dances, and concert repertoire. While we will discuss this era by discussing extraordinary piano composers who wrote using classical forms but with romantic style, we're going to start that paragraph over again, so if we could cut and go back to the beginning of that paragraph, please. 2 important types of music developed in this era: program music and nationalistic music. Program music illustrates a literary or artistic work, as seen in the works of Mendelssohn, Schumann, Berlioz, and Liszt. Nationalistic music reflects the culture of different nations by using their folk songs and dances in concert repertoire. While we will discuss this era by discussing extraordinary piano composers, composers who wrote using classical forms but with romantic style, program music and nationalistic music, you'll see that several composers did all of these. Also, sometimes the piano music was programmatic and or nationalistic. Sometimes symphonies were programmatic or nationalistic, and sometimes they were absolute music, which meant without being based on a story. While I worked in previous eras to narrow our featured composers to just a few, that all flies out the window in the Romantic era. And I'm not even covering all the composers in your ebook. There is such a wealth of diverse genius that you'll be hearing about several composers because they are still a large part of the concert repertoire. Remember that this is the era of extremes, with many works written for a single instrument and others for 1,000. We're going to start with the minimal side, solo instruments and duets. The piano was the favorite instrument of the Romantic era. It was a true status symbol. Most middle-class homes had one, and with the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution, the middle class now had the wherewithal to support musicians. Evenings found families and friends making music around the piano, either cameo solo works or art songs or even piano quintets. Many great composers emerged in this new demand for intimate works, including Chopin, Schumann, Liszt, Brahms, and Schubert. Of those, two great piano virtuosos became like rock stars in this era, Frédéric Chopin and Franz Liszt. Literally, a crowd of thousands would form a parade with torches escorting them to their concerts. Noblemen would gift them with jeweled swords. They attracted overflow crowds, accomplishing technical feats on the piano that startled and excited the public. Frédéric Chopin was born near Warsaw, Poland, the son of a Polish mother and French father. He started piano lessons at 7 and wrote his first composition that same year. A year later, he performed his first concerto in public. By the time he was 12, his famous teacher decided he had nothing else to teach him. He studied at the Warsaw Conservatory and then concertized throughout Europe. When he performed in Paris in 1831, his reception was so cordial that he decided to make it his home. He was paid high wages by many society homes to teach piano and became quite wealthy. Through Franz Liszt, Chopin met Aurore Dudevant, an avant-garde, aristocratic, cross-dressing, best-selling novelist who lived under her pen name as George Sand. She was a free-thinking woman who smoked cigars and entranced Chopin, then loved him, then nursed him through his tuberculosis. Here she is in a portrait with other literary figures of that era, Alexandre Dumas and Victor Hugo, listening to Liszt play the piano, wearing trousers and smoking a cigar. Her children were hostile to Chopin, though, and after some years, their relationship grew bitter. Heartbroken over their affair ending, Chopin embarked on an ill-advised 7-month concert tour to England and Scotland. He lived only a few months after his return to Paris and died in 1849. On a personal level, while other composers deeply touch me, Chopin was the composer who stole my heart. No matter what I'm feeling, be it grief or love, frustration or peacefulness, Chopin has a composition that expresses it. He has incredible diversity of pieces expressing every mood. In addition to large free-form works like ballades, scherzos, and fantasies, he wrote a variety of dance-like pieces, including waltzes that ranged from contemplative to exuberant. Maybe his most famous waltz is what has been coined the Minute Waltz. In the end, Chopin didn't expect it to be performed in a minute. He and George Sand were watching their dog chase his tail, and she said, "Write a song about that." This is performed by Lang Lang, an incredible Chinese pianist who has become a familiar name in classical music. Chopin also wrote polonaises, a dance from his native Poland. He was always loyal to Poland and was deeply upset about the Russian occupation of Warsaw, and he wrote his fiery polonaises to inspire his homeland to resist. This is also performed by Lang Lang, who's pretty amazing. Contrast these with his lovely lyrical character pieces like preludes and nocturnes. Your ebook has this nocturne in E flat. His melody lines are beautiful and lyrical, enhanced by an ornamentation that is exquisite. Notice how he plays the same two melodies throughout this piece, each time ornamenting them differently. Chopin loved to have two hands playing in different rhythmic patterns, where one hand would be fitting 12 notes to a beat and the other hand would have to play 13, and so they would never nest. But it adds an amazing intricacy to the piece. Here is one of his incredible etudes. An etude is a work that drills a single technical problem. When Warsaw did rebel against the Russian occupation, he celebrated with his famous revolutionary etude. This fiendishly difficult etude was written by Franz Liszt. Liszt was born in Hungary. He was the son of a steward of the Esterházy family. He began piano lessons when he was 6 years old and started a dazzling career as a concert virtuoso when he was only 11. When he was 19, he heard and was overwhelmed by Niccolò Paganini, the famous violin virtuoso, and was determined to have the same skills on the piano. He stopped concertizing for a few years so he could practice 8 to 12 hours a day, and when he returned, he became a legend. Brahms said, "Whoever has not heard Liszt cannot speak of piano playing." Liszt never married. He had 2 long affairs, one with Countess Marie d'Agoult, who gave him 3 children, and one with Princess Caroline von Sayn von Wittgenstein. Oh, I'm going to say this again. Princess Caroline von Sayn-Wittgenstein, neither of whom were free to marry him. Then in 1859, he went to Rome and took minor orders, becoming an abbé in 1865. Liszt wrote volumes of piano music, sometimes gleefully bragging that no one else would be able to play them. His Hungarian Rhapsodies are favorite concert pieces and also influential program music. Once again, here is Lang Lang playing Liszt's amazing Hungarian Rhapsody, number 2. He also transcribed many orchestral pieces for piano, as well as symphonies, masses, and oratorios. He also wrote symphonic poems, which were a form of program music, which will be discussed in another segment. Here is a video of his magnificent Transcendental Etude number 10. You have this recording in your ebook, but here you get to see it for the extraordinary piano work. This is another lecture. Next lecture. The art song is a musical setting of a poem for piano and voice, also called a lied. It was a favorite vocal form in the Romantic era. Romantic music is linked closely to literature, and composers enjoyed adding the drama of music to the celebrated poetry of Goethe or other German or Austrian poets. The piece is really a duet for voice and piano, the accompaniment being just as important as the voice, supplying a dramatic backdrop to the work. Often, several art songs would be grouped as a multi-movement work, sharing a common theme or musical idea. When these were grouped together, they were called a song cycle. The form used most frequently in art songs is called strophic, in which the same music is used in all the verses, much like when you sing Jingle Bells with several verses. They all have the same melody. Other times they are through composed, in which the music for each verse changes as the storyline changes. There were several composers of art songs, Schubert, Brahms, and Schumann among them. We will focus on Franz Schubert, who wrote more than 600 of them. Schubert lived from 1797 to 1828. Notice how his life straddles the classical and romantic periods. Historians always place him in the Romantic era, though, possibly because of these works and because of the romantic lyricism of his melodic lines. Schubert lived his short life of 31 years in poverty. Only once did he receive a paid commission from the Esterházy family again, instructing their children, but he missed Vienna and his friends and left before long. He received little money from the performance and publication of his works, but mostly lived off the generosity of his friends, supplying entertainment for their evening Schubertiades, where everybody sat around the piano and just listened to Schubert's music. And then he'd sleep in their homes. Composition came easily to him. Often to pay for a meal, he would write a piece while sitting at a restaurant. He died at 31 of typhoid fever after drinking tainted water 1 year after Beethoven's death. His last wish, to be buried near Beethoven, was granted, and on his tombstone was written, "The art of music here entombed a rich possession, but even far fairer hopes." Some distinct elements mark his piano style, which often exhibits a charming Viennese dialect. In some pieces, he repeats chords and notes so rapidly that they form a continuous accompaniment pattern as a sort of measured tremolo. Really, this is a carpal tunnel experience. He does this in the number you're just about to hear called Erlkönig. When you hear these repeated chords happening in the left hand, really rapid, and you have to just have pity on that pianist. This is a story depicting a father carrying his dying child while he's being pursued by the Grim Reaper. And he's riding on a horse, and you hear the horse's hooves in this tremolo. You have the translation in your ebook. Be sure to read that. Listen to this when there's no children around, because apparently the students who have listened to it with their children listening have said the kids haven't slept for quite a while after that. So no children.